For my final project for the course ETEC 540, I would like to reflect on how digitized literature has shaped education based on my own experiences as a student and as a teacher. The reason I choose to do a reflection on my journey is because as a millennial, I have witnessed the change from being in an analog world to a digitized world. I belong to the generation that had experienced what it was like going to school with no internet and blackboards in the classroom to then finally catching up to technology while I was in university. I hope to add this reflection to my e-portfolio to complete my journey in the MET program. Before I go into my main topic, I would like to give a little background about myself. I was introduced to the concept of the internet when I was 12 years old in grade 7. At that time, my mom had dialed-up internet, which meant if I needed to use the internet, she couldn't use the phone. Unlimited internet was also not a thing back then. I had to keep track of the amount of time I was allowed to use the internet per day. Needless to say, when I entered high school the following year in the September of 1999, it was quite different from what students would expect to see on their first day of school. I still remember every grade 8 was supposed to take 8 courses. I had to haul at least 7 textbooks home to wrap so we wouldn't damage them. It was normal to see students bring textbooks back and forth between their classrooms and their lockers. Very often, you would see students with really heavy backpacks because they needed to bring their textbooks home to complete their homework. Nobody really complained because it was normal. When I graduated from high school and entered into my first year of post-sec education in the September of 2004, technology has advanced slightly. I brought my first laptop with me to class so I could take notes. I still had to haul around textbooks for each of my classes, and if a textbook was not available, I had to buy the printed notes from the bookstore. I quite like these printed notes as I could highlight and write in them without feeling guilty. Fast forward to September 2008, I was in my first class of getting my Bachelor's of Education. This was the very first time when I was introduced to an e-textbook. Not only was I given access to the digitized textbook, I also had access to workbooks and a lot of resources online to help me with my teaching. At that moment, my prof from the Faculty of Education was still from the older generation, so we got a lot of paper resources that were quite outdated. My specialty is in science, and so keeping things relevant is quite important. During my first year of teaching in 2009, I offered my students the choice of owning an actual textbook and having the digital copy. Most of them were happy with the digital copy because that meant they didn't have to bring their textbooks home. In addition, some of them commented on the fact that it was easier to find answers to questions using the search function. I quickly realized the downfall of students blindly searching for the answers rather than reading the entire chapter for context. As I was trying to figure out the pros and cons of digitized textbooks, I came across an article by Seawall about the inevitable replacement of paper textbooks by digitized textbooks in the future. He mentioned a couple of very good points about the problem of using digitized textbooks. By transitioning to e-textbooks, we are assuming that all children have easy and equal access to electronic hardware at school and home, yet the gap between rich and poor students is vast. When I thought of my experience as a new teacher in the early 2010s, I've always taught at elite or more well-to-do schools. I took it for granted that every student had a device of their own or was provided one by the school. Another point that he mentioned is, can a 10 or 12 years old be expected to be reliable hardware custodians, especially if the devices are school-owned? What happens when they drop the reader on the floor and it breaks? This became problematic at my current school with a classroom set of Chromebooks. Very often, students would accidentally damage the Chromebooks, and this became very expensive for the school to replace. Although we do not order textbooks anymore, which does save some money, there is still a high cost of replacement and upkeep of these devices. Let's assume that every student can own a device and cost is not an issue. Does digitized textbooks provide an advantage for students' learning? Seawall mentioned that the most high-minded educational software designers admit that electronic formats are not conducive to sustained reading. With the advancement of technology, what I have noticed is that the attention span of teenagers has been shortened due to the fast pace of social media websites and the instantaneous answers they get when they use Google. It wasn't until my third job that I appreciated the usefulness of digitized textbook. When I was working at West Point Grade Academy, I worked as a special education teacher in the resource center. I worked with kids who have an IEP with various conditions from dyslexia to autism. It was then I was made aware of various audiobook programs that were useful for students who have trouble with reading. Furthermore, e-textbooks has brought a whole new level of opportunity for blind students or students with cerebral palsy. This would not have been possible if e-textbooks were not available. In addition, digitized textbooks do promise easy, quick revision and correction, and not years of waiting for new printed editions. This is especially relevant in the sciences, where I find that usually by the time a book is published, some of the content could have already been revised or updated. E-textbooks would allow revisions or corrections to happen much quicker than a printed version. Moving forward, I believe that whether we like it or not, e-textbooks would be the future. I came across a study about applying artificial intelligence to support science learning, especially in the field of biology. This study explored how learning with an AI book, which enables the inputting of questions and receiving of suggested questions to understand biology, can help students learn more effectively when compared with the regular e-textbooks. The findings of the study show that it is not enough to just provide students with digitally advanced technology, but it really depends on students' own willingness and ability to make use of available supportive features. In conclusion, I believe that a student's learning effort and the support that they receive is far more important than the nature of the technology on its own. Thank you for watching my presentation.